Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican about the interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and today we are talking about everybody's favorite subject. At least I think it's everybody's favorite subject. We're going to talk about the weather, and specifically Santa Fe weather, with Jay Faught, who has made a mission of letting people in the capital city know what's going on outside of their windows. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Inez. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Talk about your love of the weather, because you have a normal job, you go to work every day, and then on the side, basically, you're putting together a Facebook page and all this other information, going really into detail about what's happening with the weather in Santa Fe. So how did this all come about?
Well, I have had an interest in the weather since I was a child. Back when my father was an editor and publisher of a newspaper, and he would bring home the newspaper every day, and I would see the weather page, and I was fascinated by the highs and the lows, and around that time, I started to see my first color weather page, and we were having a heat wave, and I just really got interested in that. And then we moved to Texas. We're from New Mexico, but we moved to Texas for a little bit, and there were a lot of tornado watches and
Yes.
warnings, and so then there was a different thing to be interested about besides just the heat and the
Yeah.
cold. And so I've had an interest in weather for a long time, and I went to college and got a degree in journalism and broadcast meteorology. And I worked in weather, actually, forecasting the weather at a TV station in Ohio for about 3 years. And but I didn't want to really move around from one market to another market to work my way up and make more money. And so I decided to move back home to New Mexico. And started working in transportation, and that's what I do now. But my passion has always been there. I've
Yeah.
continued to make a weather forecast every day for most of my life. In high school, I would actually give the weather forecast to my friends and slide their forecast into their lockers. And people would be coming to me and asking me, what are the chances that we would have a snow day each year, or each day? And so it just kind of really became a thing. And so it was nice to work in that field, but now that I'm not working in that field, the passion has not left. And when I moved back to Santa Fe, because I've moved here and there around, and when I moved back to New Mexico about 3 years ago, um, I realized, especially living in Santa Fe for the first time, because I lived in Albuquerque before, that there was something missing in
Yep.
Santa Fe. Is that the meteorologists at the TV stations in Albuquerque do a great job, but they focus a lot on the Albuquerque area, and the weather in Santa Fe is so different from Albuquerque.
That's right.
And so
I mean, it's so different from the plaza to the midtown to the airport. I mean,
right, it
it's
is. And
crazy.
we have our own microclimates in Santa
Yep.
Fe that maybe we can talk about. But it was just that there was a need here that I felt like the community wanted, and needed to hear what the forecast was going to be like here and in detail. They might tell you what the high and low is going to be and a chance for snow or something, but that might be all you get on the news. And so this was a little bit more detailed about where is the snow going to be and how much snow you might see at the plaza compared to the airport,
Yep.
or why is it 100 degrees at the airport and it's only 94 degrees at the plaza? There's a difference there, because of our elevation and the topography that we have in our region. So let's talk about those differences. And I wanted to start this Facebook page and website because it was just at first it was really just a way to express my passion and get that out there, because I just me, and I didn't really care if people followed me. It was just a way to get it out there. It was kind of fun. But once I started the Facebook page and I started getting a following, it was really nice to actually hear from community members to say that they really appreciated it, and wanted that detailed forecast for our area.
No, it's so important. I remember the first time I came to Santa Fe as an adult, I was a reporter at the New Mexican in the 80s, and I had come from San Angelo, Texas, which
Mhm.
was a farming and ranching region where the weather was everything because it was the business.
Mhm.
And it was also a place where they had tornadoes and we were in the middle of a 7-year drought. There's a famous book called The Time It Never Rained that described basically what it's like when there's no rain there. And the weather was just like, we actually had a joke. We were the quick reaction weather team. So I get to New Mexico and we can't even get an accurate snow forecast downtown because we don't have the kind of weather forecasting in the capital city that you find everywhere else. So our weather snow was taking a pica pole and going into the parking lot and measuring the snow by hand.
Hmm.
Which probably wasn't that accurate, but that we did what we did and we got people to get rain gauges all over town and that kind
That's
of thing.
great.
But there was there's a void. And I wonder, even though the National Weather Service is in Albuquerque, why no one has ever pushed to do better by this part of the world, because we are, after all, the capital.
It is unusual. I mean, a small city capital,
Right.
so and we're close to a larger market.
Yep.
I know at one time when I was growing up in Albuquerque too, that there was a Santa Fe bureau for the TV markets, and you would get news stories on a regular basis there, and perhaps then if there was weather, you would. They certainly bring the video cameras up and from Albuquerque now and do that coverage, but it wasn't something that you got every day all the time.
Right.
That you maybe got that more often then. I don't think we have that as much anymore.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And when I saw your page, I thought this is a really great need being filled because, people want to know if they're going to work, is it going to be icy along the way? And depending on where you live in town, the conditions could change a lot just in, a 10-mile commute.
Yeah, they can. The elevation of the plaza is near 7,000 feet. And down here, I live on the south end of town, and the airport is about 62 or 6,300 feet. And
Wow.
that may not sound like a whole lot, but it is. There can be a lot of difference there. And just also the topography and the plateaus that we have, it just makes a difference and on the type of weather that we get in one part of town versus the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you go about starting and finding sources to get the weather?
So that's a good question. So I subscribe to several different forecasting models. And so there's a, a, a page called windy.com that is also embedded on my website. And my website is santafewx.com. And so you can actually see on that page where that windy model is. It's actually not a model its own. It has a variety of models. So you can get the European model, the GFS model, and about 5 different forecasting models you can see there. When I embed it on my website, you can only get one. You get the Euro model, and so the Euro model is actually pretty accurate for Santa Fe. Not all the time. Every model is a little bit different, and you kind of look at all of those forecasting models to make a decision on your individual forecast, because you kind of take all of that into account. You might, what are all these different models saying, but also what's your experience and your knowledge about this local community, and what have we seen in the past with these same type of weather patterns? And then that's where that local personal flavor can really come into an accurate forecast. But so going back to your original question about where do I get my information from, and so I have those models there, but then I also subscribe to another one called pivotalweather.com, because anybody who has a passion for the weather, it has probably a million different websites out there that they refer to, but you can kind of, there's probably 25 different weather models on that website. And so it's really interesting to see what they're all saying, and then kind of come in with a forecast of your own. And then I also, of course, look at the National Weather Service forecast and see what they're saying as well. And I think they do a really good job actually of forecasting the weather for Santa Fe and our communities. But again, we have those little local niches where the weather can be quite different from one place to another.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think the trouble is the airport is just so far from everything where the weather actually happens. So what you get for the Santa Fe, reports of this is what weather we had isn't at all like what you experience elsewhere in town. And that's just
Yeah.
always kind of a disconnect.
And Santa Fe is not unique in that
Yep.
aspect. The weather is often officially observed at the airport in many cities, and that oftentimes the airport is kind of outlying in the outlying areas of the city too. Denver's a great example of that. Denver International Airport is like I think it's in Kansas. It's so far away from the city, and it's not quite that far,
Yeah.
but it is so far from the city. But that is the official weather observation site for Denver, and there's many cities like that. So just kind of take that into account. And that's one thing that I also do in my forecast is I tend to forecast for the airport because that's where the official observations are taken. And then we can also kind of compare on, okay, if I said the forecast was going to be 90 degrees but it was only 84 at the plaza, there's not an official observation site at the plaza. So I kind of compare it directly at the airport where that observation site is. I will also note that the airport has not always been the official observation site for Santa Fe. It has been in different places. Back in the day, early on, records have began long time ago in Santa Fe, the 1870s, I believe. And back then, the observation location was near Canyon Road. And so
Okay.
if you look at some of the records that Santa Fe holds from way back then, it does seem like it was a bit cooler back then, and it didn't get as hot as often because it was higher in elevation and more up on Canyon Road. Then in the 1970s, there was some observations that were taken down in Seton Village, so that's on the south side of the city, and so a little bit warmer there. And then I think that the National Weather Service started officially observing in the 90s, in the late 90s at the airport, but there was some records that were missing, actually. No records were kept at all from the 1958 to about 1998 in Santa Fe,
Wow.
officially. And
Right.
so I don't have access easily to all the information that the National Weather Service has. So I look at um, those three locations where I can um, get that weather data and weather records. And so sometimes my records might be a little bit different than what the National Weather Service has because there's basically there's 40 years, not 30 years, there's 40 years of missing data from 1958 to 1998. And so my records include all of that
Oh,
missing
wow.
time period.
That's really interesting, and that's probably why we had such trouble doing weather stories because the data wasn't where we thought it was or where it was supposed to
Yeah.
be. Yeah, that's interesting. On that note, we'll be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking about Santa Fe weather. And Jay, I was thinking, one of the things to me that's so important is that we're getting more extreme weather these days. So forecasts can be critical to the decisions you make about your life. I mean, how does that factor into what you're working on when you're doing forecasts and you know that, wow, it's going to be hot for, 50 days of the summer instead of 20 days or whatever?
Right. And that's a good question because we have noticed that, the last 3 years have been very hot in Santa Fe. Um, I moved it back to Santa Fe about 3 years ago, and this isn't how I remembered it being. I always remember Santa Fe as being a cooler place in town, or in the state. But we actually have had, I know the last 2 summers have been at least the most 90-degree days that we've seen in any year. But this kind of goes back to the story as well as where observations are taken. So I think that climate change and global warming is part of it, but it's not just that. That's not the only story. As we talked about earlier, the observation locations for Santa Fe have changed over the years, and it was a higher elevation at Canyon Road, and then when the observations changed to Santa Fe Airport, it's much lower in elevation. It's about 62 or 6,300 feet. And so it will be warmer in that location. And so that's also partly why that you're seeing more 90-degree days in Santa Fe than what you've seen in the past. So it's a little bit of everything. And then just weather extremes. We've gone through many years of drought and
Yeah.
have not had a lot of rain in a lot of years too. But and then sometimes we'll get a monsoon of a great monsoon season, and that makes all the difference in the world. And so letting people know that there's a good chance for thunderstorms, and more widespread, and where that's coming from, um, is 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 all part of the story, and telling people what the weather's going to be.
No, I know, this last summer, we had that supposed 500-year flood or 1,000-year flood in 2018, I think it was, and then last summer, my house, which nearly flooded the last time,
Oh,
it came back through our yard again, so the extremes are getting narrower, and knowing it's coming helps us figure out what to move out of the yard and make sure that we don't have a truck in a dip that could float away, so it's really important.
right. That's a good point. Yeah, certainly. If you have things in the yard that you need to move, and just prepare your house, and especially in those wetter years, if you know you have an area of your house that floods when you get a lot of rain, then maybe you can put sandbags out there in advance and those kind of things.
Yeah. And I think it's really important when you look at the patterns of weather, we're so used to getting our precipitation, a lot of it through snow in the winter, and then we get runoff. And now we're getting maybe more of it in monsoons if we do have monsoons. So, how do we adjust as a city to that? And the weather forecasting, I think, helps us kind of plan, I hope.
Yeah, it certainly does. And that's a good point too, is that this year it's also very spotty. We had this past summer, we had a good monsoon in parts of New Mexico, but not in others.
Yeah.
And so the Santa Fe Airport actually is above normal for the
Right.
year, but that's not the case in Albuquerque or other locations and that are very close. So we were still in a drought because it was a years long drought. And so there's still drought conditions across New Mexico. And we just went through a very uh, fairly dry November. I mean, we technically were above normal, I suppose, because I just did the stats for that at the Santa Fe airport, but not much above normal. And we've been going through these periods where we get a bit of rain or hopefully a little bit of snow this winter, and then several weeks of dryness, and then we get kind of a period where we can get a little bit more rain or snow, and hopefully we can get more as we go through this winter and spring. We can see those patterns and get into some of that. But honestly, if I can tell you real quick that we're going to be in we're in a weak La Nina this year, and typically
Mm.
what happens during a weak La Nina is you're going to have above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. But yeah, we'll see what this winter really holds, though.
Yeah, it always that is one that tends to surprise us, but it's definitely not the way as we all say, it's not like it was when I was a kid. I mean, we had one of those winters in the 80s when I was back the second year I was here, where it started snowing in like October, and I don't know that it ever completely melted until April. That's
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they had to drop hay from to cows and stuff, had bring in the National Guard to help them because people couldn't get out of their homes.
Yeah,
So,
that was in the 80s here in Santa Fe. So,
in northern New Mexico across.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I went back and I looked at 70 years worth of weather data um, recently to kind of figure out what this year's winter weather could be like. And so I looked at just the weak La Nina years.
Oh, wow.
And so there's quite a variety. When you're talking about a La Nina, that is typically it's the cooling of the Pacific waters, opposite of El Nino, which is the warming of the Pacific waters. And during a La Nina, I mentioned typically it is below normal precipitation. But when you're looking at a weak La Nina, it's very similar to a neutral period. And so you can have a lot of variety. So I want to say it was 1983 or 84. It may have been 84, 85. I can't remember the exact. I don't have my stats right here with me, but Los Alamos had over 120 inches of snow that
Yeah.
year. And then On the opposite, just a few years ago, I want to say 2017, 18, or around that period, Santa Fe only had about 5 inches of snow. And
Wow.
so, and both of those are weak La Ninas. So it can it can really swing one way or the other when you're talking about a weak La Nina. It's a little bit easier to forecast when you say you're going to be in a La Nina or a strong La Nina, then you know you're definitely going to have, drier conditions and above normal temperatures.
Right. It's definitely, and I think that's one of the reasons people become impatient. They're like, oh, they always get it wrong or whatever, but it's complicated and conditions change. I mean, the hurricane can be heading towards your house in Florida, and all of a sudden there's a veer and then it doesn't hit you. But if you hadn't have left, you could have been dead.
Yeah, right.
No.
It's better to be safe than sorry, definitely. My sister, I have a sister that lives in Tampa, Florida, and she's evacuated several times.
Oh,
Her house has always been okay, but she's also always been safe. So,
yeah, it's smart. No,
yeah.
I lived just over the bridge from Tampa after graduate school, and my island never got hit, and I went through one. It was supposed to be a hurricane, and we lost 1 mile, so it was only a tropical storm, and I said after that, "I'm coming home," and I came back to New Mexico, and that last big hurricane just wiped Anna Maria out as
Oh
much as
gosh.
all of the area, so I'm
Yeah.
kinda glad I came home because I always say we don't have those kinds of weather disasters in New Mexico, the sudden ones necessarily, except maybe for snowstorms.
Yeah, we have snowstorms, we have floods. Like
Yeah.
you said, that 1,000-year flood that happened, and then you got flooded again after that. So
Yep.
we have that, and I think that's one of the main causes of death and during a winter or during a weather system
Yep.
is flooding. So it's people need to take those things seriously. So we have flooding to worry about here, and then and eastern New Mexico does get tornadoes.
Yes.
And honestly, everywhere in New Mexico is subject to a tornado. Just because we're in the mountains doesn't mean that we cannot have a tornado. I also looked back at the last 50 years of tornado data in New Mexico, and because somebody had asked me if I thought we were getting more tornadoes because of the climate change or global warming, and so I thought that was a great question. So I wanted to go back and look at it, and honestly, it hasn't really changed.
Yep.
I
Oh,
think what
interesting.
we average about 2 tornadoes a decade in Santa Fe County, um, but and that has been this same case since the 1950s. But what has changed is that we have much better weather warnings out there, and so when you see rotation in the sky or a potential for rotation, the National Weather Service does a great job in getting that warning out to people and say this is your advance notice, and that is what has saved a lot of lives across the country is because of that
Yep.
technology that we have now that is able to do that. So I think we're hearing about it more, but doesn't mean that we're actually seeing actual more tornadoes here.
Oh, that's interesting. All right. On that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more conversations different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking about the weather with Jay Faught. And so far this winter, it has been pretty dry, although as we tape, supposedly we're going to get some snow maybe in the next couple of days. So that's kind of exciting.
Keeping my fingers crossed for that. It's the first snow of the season, and by the time that this probably airs, people will know whether my forecast was accurate or not. So
And think about when you make your forecast. I know I worked very briefly at a television station when I was going to Texas Tech, and I remember people would come up to you in the grocery store and just feel like they had every right to talk to you. I can Yeah, I can imagine if you're the weather guy, they really wanna talk to you.
They do, and that's interesting you say that. My first job in television was in a small market in Lima, Ohio.
Oh,
There's 212 TV markets across the country, and at that time, y- Lima was market 201. We are a small market. Um, we are a smaller community than Santa Fe, but we broadcast to a wider area than just the town of Lima. And every time I went to the grocery store, somebody would run into me and ask me what the weather was, and and people do feel like they know you. There was a time when I had egg beaters in my grocery cart, and somebody pulled them out and said, "You don't need egg beaters. You need the real thing." And they put the real eggs in my cart. So I think everybody kind of has a relationship with the weather,
yep.
and when you see somebody that forecasts the weather, it's like somebody you know. And I loved that, and I hope people can do that to me too. If they see me in the community here in Santa Fe, please say hello and ask me what the weather is, because I love being part of the local community and helping people with their individual forecasts and needs. I get emails and questions now from individuals saying, I'm going to be traveling to Raton, or I'm going to be going to Colorado, and what's the weather going to be like on my trip? And it's nice. I don't mind helping people out like that.
Oh, that's a really great service, and I think it points to how important the weather is to helping us plan our lives. I mean, I remember when I think Governor Martinez had just gotten elected, and this was not her fault at all, and she handled it very well when the natural gas lines got broken, and it was really, really cold, and
Oh yeah,
people were going to freeze to death if something
right.
wasn't done. And it's things like that that if you have advance notice of, you can get wood
Mhm.
or you can stock up your groceries, so that you can get through the coldness.
Right. It's certainly helpful for those situations, and I wonder if you're referring back to like 2011 or 2012, around that time frame. Is that when that was?
Something like that. I don't
Okay.
remember exactly when it was. I just remember we have a fireplace and we had a gas stove, so we were great. And our relatives in Taos were great because they all had wood stoves.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
people in cities that were electric really were cold, cold, cold. And
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
I remember in that year, Santa Fe had their all-time record low of about 24 degrees below zero.
wow,
And I worked for the rail runner at the time, and actually there were cracks that in the rail because of the cold weather. And so they had to go really slow, or actually not have service over that area until they were able to weld those together, because um, I guess I'm getting into transportation, but it's related to weather too, because uh, the rails are only set at a basically a 100-degree window, and so anytime it gets above that threshold or gets below that threshold, the rail has a tendency to crack and separate, and you can reset what that window is, but we don't often see temperatures at 24 degrees below zero, so that
right,
those unusual. So you can't really plan far in advance for something like that. That's going to be, you could see that there's a cold air mass coming our way. Um, but you don't really know until you get a little bit closer to that time frame about what those actual temperatures are going to be. So if I can just also mention along those lines, is that we are making forecasts now that are accurate for 5-7 days out, and they're pretty accurate. Once you get beyond the 7-day period, the accuracy of a forecast falls to about 50%. So
okay,
it's still somewhat accurate, but it's more of a pattern. Like, you can see, like, oh, this is going to be colder during this time frame, or there might be a chance for some more precipitation, but you may not know where that rain snow line is going to be so much until you get closer to that time period. And then when you look into long range forecasts further out, beyond that 10-day period or a 30-day period, it's going to be more of a pattern change. And what do you see in those, that could there be an air mass that be coming down from the from Canada that could be spilling into the west and into the Central Plain states, that could spill across the mountains into our region? You can see that there's a possibility of that, but where
Yeah.
all that sets up is really kind of in question until you get a little bit closer in time frame.
Yeah. And it sounds like, the forecasters are really weighing a lot of different variables, and it's more complicated than a lot of people think, I believe.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to look at. I mean, when you talk about weather patterns, we're talking about certainly the La Nina and El Nino. That is a weather pattern. During El Nino, we have the warming of the Pacific waters, and we typically have wetter conditions during that time frame. So you have that. You have uh, the polar jet. You have without getting into too many details about all these dynamics, but there's a lot of dynamics in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean that play into our weather here locally. Even
Yeah.
though that we're far away from the Atlantic Ocean, it really plays into weather patterns in general across the Southwest.
No, that makes sense. And I remember in recent years, in winters, they have those what polar domes or whatever they call them in the Midwest. And I'd never heard that term until really recently. But it just seems to me that people there are very, very cold.
Yes. I lived in Ohio. I went to college in Ohio and worked at Lima, Ohio, that TV station I mentioned, and I I vowed to never go back to Ohio in the wintertime after I left. Now I have friends and family there, and occasionally I have to go back in the wintertime, but I try to only hit it in the summertime because it's
No.
just I really dread the cold. One thing that we have to our benefit here in New Mexico, even though it does get cold in Santa Fe,
Yep.
is that it generally doesn't stay cold for too long.
Right.
And the snow doesn't stick around for too long. And so it's nice that we get some snow, but it usually melts either by that afternoon or the next day or something. Unless you're in that really cold year that you experienced in the 80s where it stick around for a long time. But we don't see that happen very
Yeah.
often here. My
No.
first year in Ohio not in Ohio, but the first year in college, um, I was working at our college TV station, and that was the year that we had snow in November, and I did not see the ground again until April.
Yep.
And my very first day on the air, it was in January 1994, was the high temperature was 7 below 0, and
Ugh.
our forecasted that low that evening was 25 below. And at 6 o'clock or 5:30 when I was doing the weather, the wind chill was 63 degrees below 0. So that also was all-time record cold for Ohio, but still,
Wow.
it was very memorable and just one of those another reasons that when you experience these extremes and you have an interest in the weather, it really sticks with you. Like you remember these times. It's a memory that you can always go back to, tell your children and your grandchildren, and say, "Back when I was a kid."
And
Yeah,
back when you were a kid, that I can't even
yeah,
imagine how cold that is. That's when you go outside and your face just
yeah.
freezes right away.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was horrible,
Oh.
and I had to walk from campus so far, and so I would the freshman dorms were so far away from where all my classes were, so I would walk to building just to warm up a little bit so I could get get to class. Yeah.
We all do what we must to
Yes.
get through the weather. At Tech, when the spring came, our thing was dust storms, and everybody had contact lenses until March, and then all of a sudden, the whole school wore glasses. And now dust storms are called haboobs, which was not a term they used back then. So that's when they're really, really bad.
Yeah, yeah. You've heard more about Hoboobs lately. I know that Deming in southern New Mexico, where that's my hometown actually, and
Mhm.
that's where we've had some this past summer, and and that's you can kind of see those coming in from a distance. So
Yeah.
it's a dust storm that you might have clear skies, but then the wind is starting over a dry area that hasn't had rain in a long time, and then you can just see this cloud of dust, and it's a wall that just comes
Yep.
over you. I was in Phoenix when that happened one time, and I experienced, and it became dark.
Yeah.
It was so dark outside because of the dust storm, and we are known for our spring winds here in New Mexico. And the last few years, we've had some really big ones, I think. And so
Yeah.
dust storms are you're right, becoming more common because we also have had such dry conditions over the last several years.
No, that's true. Although I tell everybody, and look at me like we don't really care, but I always say if you haven't been in Lubbock in March, our winds are fine. They're not great, but it's not even close. Um,
Yeah.
it's man, I hate them. And the noise is the thing that gets me. And I think it's really interesting the effect the weather can have on your mood. Like if it's hot too
Mhm.
many days, you get crabby. If you don't have good air conditioning, I mean, people can die because of heat related injuries. And then just the sound of the wind, that wail can just make you go just almost crazy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And when it's day in and day out, or several times throughout the month or the season, then I think that yeah, it can really get to you too.
Yeah.
I dread spring here because of that. I don't like the cold weather, so I wanted to get warmer, but I don't want to
Yeah.
have to deal with those winds. But it's just one of those things that we have to get through so we can have the
Yes.
nice weather later on.
No, it's my joke that we get like 3 good days of spring and that's it.
Yeah,
It's a miserable season here. It's true. Anyway,
yeah.
well, this has been fascinating, and I encourage everybody to look up your site on Facebook and give us your website again.
Yeah, certainly. On my website is santafewx.com. And also the Facebook group, the Facebook page is just look for Santa Fe weather and follow us there.
Yeah, I've sure enjoyed it, and I know people will too. And on that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.